Welcome to Thrive with Pride from Age Options, an online space for LGBT plus older adults and those who care for them. This is a recording of a live event held via Zoom on March 22nd, 2022. This recorded presentation was followed by an interesting Q&A session which was not recorded. We invite you to attend next month's event to participate in these live discussions. This month, we welcomed Erin Tax and Emma Bessier from SAGE. Together, they presented an advocacy update on federal and state legislation, as well as how you can be an advocate. Please see the video description below for some helpful links. After you watch this recording, please fill out a very short survey to help us improve our online programming. It is anonymous and will take less than 5 minutes. The link to the survey is also in the video description below. Okay, well, welcome again, everyone, to the March Thrive with Pride plenary. Today we have Erin Tax and Emma Bessier. Emma Bessier? Okay.
That's right, yeah.
Getting a thumbs up. Apologies, I didn't get that beforehand, but we're glad to have Erin and Emma here today. Erin is the Director of Advocacy for SAGE, a graduate of Cornell University and the George Washington University of Law School. Erin served as the legal director at Service Members Legal Defense Network, SLDN, a leading organization challenging don't ask, don't tell in Congress and in courts. He advocates for LGBTQ plus inclusive federal aging policies that account for the unique needs of LGBTQ plus older adults. And Emma is the grassroots organizer for SAGE and works to mobilize SAGE's constituents, members of the Aging Network, and other allies to ensure the rights and dignity of LGBT older adults. Their background in reproductive rights, organizing during the 2018 midterms, and work for the Center for Popular Democracy has taught them the power of personal stories and the boundless potentials of intergenerational activism. So Emma and Erin, thank you so much for joining, and I'll turn over to you all.
Thank you for having us. So I think we're just going to get quick started. We wanted to have a few slides as well, just for visual learners, but we'll also be talking and want to make sure that, folks can answer questions. So feel free to, drop them in the chat if that's what y'all usually do, or save them to the end, whatever. But we want to make sure that kind of our folks can listen and see all of the information. We'll be sure to share the slides afterwards. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and click present. There we go. So yeah, like Jason said, Erin and I work for SAGE, and we work generally to make sure that kind of the voices and issues of LGBTQ plus older adults are really represented in legislative process and in administrative advocacy, and all of that, because we know that very often aging populations in general are very commonly kind of invisible to the wider world, and then even more so when you're LGBTQ. And this is a nice photo from our one and only National Day of Advocacy, which happened before COVID. But hopefully one day we will do another National Day of Advocacy, hopefully next year. And maybe some of you will join us. We have folks from all around the country. So yeah, basically a lot of our work is really about highlighting the voices and the stories, like I said. We really want to make sure that we are putting our elders first and telling stories and talking about what it's like to age. There's something very powerful about putting a personal face to the issue instead of just kind of talking about general, very wonky legislative things. When we work with legislative staff and others, they much prefer to talk to our constituents than they do to just me and Erin. They talk to us a lot about policy issues, so it's helpful to have more of that personal story and personal conversation. So, we'll talk at the end. If you want to get more involved in SAGE, you want to join our cohort of storytellers, we would love to have you. We're always, do a lot of preparation and training in order to make sure everybody feels comfortable. If they've never done any advocacy before, or if you have done a lot of advocacy before, we can try to help you out with what you're already doing and really support you and meet you at whatever kind of level you're coming in at. So I'll hand it over to Erin to kind of talk a little bit more about kind of the two buckets of our work in advocacy.
All right, well, thanks, Emma. So as Emma said, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we do our work here in DC and around the nation. So our work generally falls into two buckets. One, I would say, is legislative advocacy, and the second is administrative advocacy. And I think legislative advocacy is what most people think of when they think of, being a lobbyist or engaging in advocacy, because that's the one that sounds, a little bit more glamorous, although, being here in DC, it's not glamorous, I'll tell you, but that's the one that I think people think of, like schmoozing with members of Congress and going to Capitol Hill and all that sort of stuff and trying to get legislation passed. And then, yes, that's an important part of our work here. Our main, but then, I think where the rubber meets the road really is in the administrative advocacy. So, but let me give you an example of two things that we were working on and that we're currently working on legislative advocacy. The most current thing that you may have heard about, I hope you've heard about, is something called the Equality Act. And we'll get into that a little bit, what that means and why we're working on it. And then the other thing that we worked on in the past is something called the Older Americans Act, which is the primary vehicle for the organization. I think we have a whole slide on that coming up. So I'll get into that stuff in a little bit. I won't jump ahead too much, but suffice it to say, we do some legislative advocacy where we're meeting with folks on Capitol Hill, and involves, as the slide says, meetings with legislators, op-eds and letters to the editor to influence these members of Congress, making sure people can vote, that sort of thing. And storytelling training, and kind of like campaigns to kind of gin up support for things and get people engaged. And then on the administrative advocacy front, that involves working directly with federal agencies, and sometimes agencies in your state, like we've done a lot with the Illinois Department of Aging. So that's not something that your legislature has anything to do with at that point. That's really about how your local agencies are implementing the law or creating new policies and procedures to do things. So we're working with them, and we'll get into this a little bit, on implementing the Older Americans Act and influencing what are called state plans and area plans on aging, which is kind of how your local government is doing aging policy where you live. So that's kind of the gist, and we're going to dive into what some examples of what these things are in the next few slides. All right, so the Equality Act, I started going down that road of explaining it, but what is the Equality Act and why do we need it? Currently, the LGBT folks are not fully protected from discrimination in 29 states. So there you go. Luckily, in Illinois, you're red on this map, so you're in good shape. And there's a few other ones in that same boat. But if you look at this map, a good swath of the country does not have comprehensive, explicit LGBT non-discrimination protections. And we are trying to fix that with a federal law, what we hope will be a federal law called the Equality Act. So what does the Equality Act do? It bars discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity in a number of areas. And the whole idea is that you should be able to kind of navigate the world, go on vacation, go to work, go out to dinner, go to a movie, go to the hospital, go to a doctor, go to a senior center, do all the things that you want to do and not face discrimination. So what does it do? It bars discrimination in employment, in credit and lending, housing, jury service, public accommodations, which are kind of like stores, like you can think about like the Woolworths lunch counter, that kind of example, restaurants, ride shares like Uber or Lyft, hospitals, so on and so forth. And it also bars discrimination in federally funded programs. And as you could imagine, particularly with respect to social services, like a lot of aging services and supports, other programs like that, there's lots of federal money behind it. So that would include programs like Meals on Wheels, chore assistance, all sorts of things like that have federal money behind them. So again, that's kind of the goal of the Equality Act, is to make sure that whether you're trans or you're LGBT identified or both, whatever the case may be, that you can live your life free from discrimination. That's our goal at the end of the day. And there are certainly ways that all of you on the call today can help out and try to make sure that we get this over the finish line this year. I'll note for the record that it has twice passed out of the US House of Representatives. We currently have at least 50 votes in the Senate, but because there's still a filibuster, we need to get to 60 votes in the Senate. So that's why we have our work cut out for us. So that's a little bit on the Equality Act. All right, next slide. The Older Americans Act. I jumped the gun and briefly mentioned that a little bit earlier. So what is the Older Americans Act, you want to know? So the Older Americans Act is the primary vehicle for the organization and delivery of social and nutrition programs in our country. It came about in 1965 under the Great Society as a counterpart to Social Security and Medicare. You know, if you think of aging as a three-legged stool, you got Social Security there for your income, Medicare there for some of your medical needs, and the Older Americans Act is everything else that should enable you to age in place in your community. That's the whole goal behind the Older Americans Act. So you can stay at home and you don't have to go to an institutionalized setting. So what does it fund? Programs like senior centers, Meals on Wheels, meals in senior centers themselves, job training, transportation assistance, caregiver support, respite support, all this sort of stuff. Again, to make it a little bit easier for you to age in place in your community. So that is the goal of the Older Americans Act. And for a very long time, we've been working to try to get LGBT folks listed as one of the target populations in the Older Americans Act. And what that would do is ensure that every single state department of aging in the country, like your Illinois Department of Aging, and every area agency on aging, you know, kind of like Age Options, or you might have other ones. You know, a lot of states have one in every county. That would be like Pennsylvania does it that way. Alaska has one, these area agencies on aging for the whole state. So it's very creative or flexible in terms of how it's structured. But long story short, we got some language in the law when it was updated just about 2 years ago now that requires all of those state departments of aging or state units on aging all across the country and all those area agencies on aging to do three things. Number one, to engage in outreach to LGBT older folks in their communities. Number two, to collect some data on what their needs are. And three, to collect data or information on whether they're meeting those needs. So that is now federal law. So whether you're in Cook County, whether you're in rural parts of Mississippi, wherever you are, your state department of aging and your area agency on aging have to do those three things. And now we're working across the United States to make sure, you know, what's termed the aging network, all these, you know, state departments of aging and those area agencies on aging are following the law and doing what they're supposed to do to make sure they're reaching out to LGBT older folks in their community. So that is the new language. Emma.
Yeah, so I feel like that was, we do a lot of work in the national and federal level, as you can see that Erin was talking about, you know, organizing all those meetings with legislators and things like that. But we also kind of wanted to touch upon what we do also here in Illinois. And we work really closely with our on-the-ground partners, Jano, who's on here from Pride Action Tank. We're working really closely with them, and Quality Illinois as well at AARP Illinois has been a great partner of ours. And right now in the kind of legislative session, we really have one bill that would do three things that would that we're really focusing on with our partnership. So last year we issued this report called Disrupting Disparities, which kind of went over challenges and needs and solutions for LGBTQ plus folks in Illinois who are over the age of 50. And from that report, we kind of came out with all of these needs and had a few policy recommendations. And that is the Disrupting Disparities for LGBTQ plus older adults bill, which for folks who are really interested in the legislative process is SB 3490. It is currently, from memory, it is passed the Illinois House of Representatives already and is now kind of waiting in the Senate. And we're pretty confident about it moving forward. We've had some great allies, including State Senator Karina Villa. And basically what the bill would do is it would establish a statewide commission on LGBTQ plus aging, which there's one other one in Massachusetts in the country. I don't believe that there's also one in Pennsylvania, I believe, but that was not enacted legislatively. And then it would also require all aging organizations that receive state funding to have cultural competency training. So like Age Options and Age Guide, which I believe have already undergone all of this training, which is why we have great programs like this for the folks who, you know, maybe however, so in Illinois, we have a really great We have a great Department of Aging where Director Paula Basta is an amazing advocate for us. She's an out lesbian. So actually, most of these organizations are already trained in cultural competency, but what we want to do is make sure that this is permanent, that this is going to be codified, it's going to be in the law, so that, you know, when unfortunately Paula won't be the director of the Department of Aging forever. So should she/when she leaves, we want to make sure that these aging organizations are still trained. And then it would also establish a point person for LGBTQ plus aging affairs at the Illinois Department of Aging as well, to really make sure that we have an advocate at the state level for LGBTQ plus aging issues. So that's really what we're organizing around right now here in Illinois. And kind of what to do about it. We've been working on with all of our storytellers, like I mentioned before, on helping out folks with letters to the editor and op-eds, which anybody can write. We have sort of a template that you can write and then personalize and add your own personal story to make sure that it's just a good way to raise awareness about the bill, to, you know, let your state senator and your state representative know that this is something that their constituents care about, and it'll just help push it forward, and then hopefully also help in general push LGBTQ plus aging issues forward. And even if your policymakers are supportive, it's always good to call them and write a letter to thank them and affirm your support. It means that they're more likely to continue this work later. And, you know, if they're not supportive, then it's a good reason to call them and try to convince them to vote for the bill and really tell your personal story. And similarly, we have a template that we can send around afterwards if you're interested in, you know, these letters to the editor and op-eds, if you're interested in calling, but you feel like you want a little bit of a script first. So that's what we're working on legislatively in Illinois. And I don't know why it's not, there we go. So like I said, you know, we want to make it really as easy as possible for folks to get involved and have the tools that they need to get involved. So we'll send around this link later, but if you fill out our form at sageusa.org/advocacy interest, we can learn a little bit more about you, and we'll reach out to help you get involved. You know, if that's becoming a spokesperson, if you want to speak to the press about LGBTQ aging issues, if you want to speak to your legislator, if you want to write a piece, if you want to write an op-ed, if you can speak on behalf of your organization, that's always helpful too, to have organizational support, and kind of join in the work that we're doing with Equality Illinois and others. So we would love to have you join us, you know, maybe attend a storytelling training or something, and we'll send around these slides and the link around later. So that's kind of the link if you really want to get, you know, really deeply involved. We also have this thing called the Action Squad, which is brand new, which is kind of a group of our dedicated activists, storytellers, elders, caregivers, you know, allies, providers, really anyone that wants to stand up for LGBTQ older adults. And, you know, join our email list, and we'll basically share relevant action alerts as they come up. Make sure that you have the tools you need. Aaron mentioned, you know, we have campaigns like letter writing campaigns and call campaigns to make sure that folks really, it's as easy as possible for them to contact their elected officials. And we're really trying to make sure that there's sort of a dedicated community of activists around the country, so you can also kind of maybe learn about what other folks are doing outside of Illinois and get involved in kind of the national work as well. So if you're looking more to get email updates, you can just go to sageusa.org, our website, and go to sage-action alerts, sage-action-alerts. And again, we'll send out the slides and the link after as well. So there's a lot of information. I want to make sure we have like time for conversation and kind of questions, and I'll stop sharing my screen so we can see our faces and I can look at the chat.
Well, Emma, thank you so much for that great presentation. I'm going to stop the recording and we'll open up for Q&A if that's okay. Thank you.
Yeah, sounds great.
Thanks again to Emma and Aaron for that great presentation. Don't forget to see the video description below for more resources. Please join us live on April 26, 2022 at 11 a.m. Central Time for a presentation from One Roof Chicago about LGBT plus age-friendly housing. Log-on information is at our website and also below in the video description. Thanks for watching, and please don't forget to fill out the quick survey also in the video description.